The Death God's Daily Troubles by MagicalDucky. Chapter 30. Back Pain is the Nemesis of the Dignified Knight Captain. Edge of the Middle District. 7th Squad Barracks. Halbert's point of view. Are you ready? The sound of Captain Arya's calm voice rang out at the empty training fields as I faced my opponent and took a stance before confirming that I was prepared to start the spar. I'm ready. Reflected in my eyes was Vice Captain Edward. And in the background nearby I could hear the rest of the 7th Squad Knights faintly cheering me on. Go get 'em, rookie, shouted Elaine. Give it your best shot, said Lillian. If you beat Edward, I'll bump you up and score a bit, cooed Charlotte. The sound of their cheering gave me a bit of courage, but after a moment I took a deep breath and quietly emptied my mind to focus all of my attention on the fight. I watched intensely as Vice Captain Edward took a stance before confirming he was prepared to start too. I'm ready. A great sword with a crystal-clear blade and an elegant-looking longsword were the only things between me and Vice Captain Edward. The noontime sun rained down on us, making the sharp edge of Vice Captain Edward's blade glimmer, while mine glistened beautifully as Captain Arya's voice rang out again. Then begin. The second Captain Arya announced the start of the spar, I immediately activated my body-strengthening magic with a short chant, while Vice Captain Edward chantlessly activated his response. Grant me the strength to go beyond. Body strengthening! I have a long way to go before I can activate my body-strengthening magic chantlessly like Captain Arya and Vice Captain Edward can. But at least I've managed to shorten the chant down to one phrase. Mana flooded my body as everything suddenly felt lighter and my kinetic vision sharpened. Then I put a strength into my legs and kicked against the ground, dashing towards Vice Captain Edward. The distance between us closed in an instant as I made a quick slash at his wrist. The instant before my sword made contact, I quickly channeled mana through it and activated Mana Edge to sharpen the blow. However, the sound of clashing metal that echoed in my ears when I dashed past him told me that Vice Captain Edward had blocked it with ease. Didn't work, huh? I expected that. After all, everyone in the 7th Squad Knights is incredibly strong, and I know the best that I'm weakest out of all of them. But that doesn't mean I'll give up so easily. The moment my foot touched the ground, I immediately spun around while twisting my body to take another swing at Vice Captain Edward. Ha-ha! But then it ended with the same result as the last swing. Vice Captain Edward blocked it with ease as I shift my legs again to return myself to my normal stance while Vice Captain Edward called out to me. You'll have to do better than that, Halbert. Show me how much stronger you've gotten. The moment Vice Captain Edward finished speaking, a light element mana instantly burst outward from his sword, solidifying into a yellow coat of mana that covered the blade as he counterattacked by swinging towards me. Here it comes, his signature technique, Luminous Stream. The moment our blades clashed, a strong impact entered my arms through my sword as I took a step back before Vice Captain Edward transitioned into another swing at me from overhead. I held up my blade and blocked it, but he just instantly shifted into another swing that I followed up to block against before the cycle repeated over and over again, while his sword left streaks of light in the air as an afterimage. After a few moments, our swords had clashed dozens of times. Sweat was dripping down my face, and I rolled out the way to just barely dodge the swing. The intense pressure from Vice Captain Edward's assault finally eased up when I managed to get out of his attack range. But I was already starting to run out of stamina, and my instincts were telling me that it wasn't over. As soon as I got up, I could see him readjusting his stance before his body started to lean forward again. If this keeps up, I won't even get a chance to strike back. I'll definitely lose in a battle of attrition. I have to break through his defenses with one big hit. I calmed down the turmoil in my mind. I inhaled another breath of cool air while realizing what I had to do to win. However, that was easier said than done. After all, my hands were already slightly shaken from blocking Vice Captain Edward's sword techniques, and my legs were only in marginally better condition. My body was telling me that I could not be able to endure the next exchange of blows, which only accentuated what I had to do even more. Vice Captain Edward's sword technique had no openings. My only chance at victory was to attack before he did. Don't collapse, Halbert. You've already gotten this far. Don't give up now. My mind raced through all my options as I thought about what sword techniques I could use. A basic sword technique definitely wouldn't work, and I can tell my normal lightning element sword techniques won't be strong enough either. Damn it, what can I even use? It was like time slowed down as I watched Vice Captain Edwards start to dash towards me. Before all of a sudden, a strange sense of tranquility spread throughout my body. It was like a wave of calm that washed away the fear and panic running rampant in my mind. My hands stopped shaking, and the uncanny clouds in my eyes finally cleared up as I heard Captain Arya's voice bubble up from the depths of my memory. Fast and powerful, yet inherently violent. Those are the attributes of lightning. And if you let your lightning run wild, it will strike you before your opponent. So the most important thing about using lightning is to control it. Control the violent nature of your lightning and concentrate it. Focus its speed and power into your sword before releasing it in a single instant. Watch closely, Halbert. This is Levin Flash. The image of Captain Arya using a lightning element sword technique appeared in my mind. One that was on completely different levels than any of the other sword techniques. It was the sword technique of a sword master. The speed and power were incomparable. All of it was concentrated into a single swift motion. There wasn't even a trace of violent nature of lightning as it sliced through the air at an incredible speed. Even though it was only cutting through empty space, I felt like it wasn't a single thing in the world that could stand up to the crimson flash of that sword. The only thing left behind the arc of that swing were the sparks of scarlet lightning from its afterimage. Control it. Condense it. Concentrate it, Halbert. Remember how Captain Arya did it. I gripped the handle of my sword tightly as an incredible sense of clarity rushed through my head. Then time returned to normal speed as Vice Captain Edward took a step forward to chase after me while I strained every muscle fiber in my arms to swing horizontally at him while channeling lightning element mana into my sword. Every last ounce of mana I had left to shoot through my arm and converge into the blade as I struggled to crudely recreate the brilliant glow of Captain Arya's sword technique. I could tell that it wasn't even close to Captain Arya's, but still, even if it was just a clumsy imitation, it was still the strongest sword technique I had right now. My sword was fast enough to be a blur, even to the enhanced kinetic vision as I shot through Vice Captain Edward's side, but he held up his sword and activated a sword technique of his own. As he grit his teeth and blocked my swing head on, a brilliant yellow glow covered the blade in the moment our blades made contact, before the burst of blue lightning propelled my sword even further inward. This is it. I could feel my swing starting to break through the defenses before suddenly the resistance from his sword lightening up under the force of the hit flat on my blade from below, shoving upward slightly. What? My line of sight honed in on the blade as it was then that I realized the force had been pushed. It had pushed my swing upward. It was his sword. Vice Captain Edward had just barely deflected my swing. My sword missed him by an inch as he leapt backwards to mitigate some of the initial impact from the swing before shifting his sword back again, and in an instant the tip of his sword was pointed at my throat. You've lost, Halbert. Edward is the winner! Captain Arya's voice rang out once more to announce the winner of the spar, and I finally realized all the tension I had before my legs buckled and I fell backwards onto the ground. After a moment, Vice Captain Edward sheathed his sword before extending a hand to help me up. That last swing was good, Halbert. For a moment there, I thought I was fighting against Captain Arya herself. But it still wasn't enough to beat you, Vice Captain Edward. I gave it my all. But in the end, you deflected it so easily. Even after all this training, it feels like I've barely made any progress at all. I grabbed his hands with a bitter smile on my face as he was pulling me up. I heard him sigh before his voice rang out again. It wasn't easy. Huh? Albert, you're not the only one training, you know. After my tie against the bastard, I've been training hard too. 1 week it took me, this entire week, just to barely get the hang of the same deflection skill he used. And I can only do it successfully about half the time. It was just luck that I managed to deflect your last swing in time. But if it was the Edward Novell of a week ago, he definitely would have been hit by that last swing of yours. Don't say that you made no progress, Albert. You've gotten stronger, and your efforts have not betrayed you. After I regained my balance, Vice Captain Edward let go of me and let out an embarrassed cough before turning away. But what greeted him was the rest of the 7th Squad Knights gathered behind him. Edward, I always thought you'd be a little too snobby and arrogant to ever show someone else your gentle side, but it looks like you finally found the courage inside of you. I'm so proud, teased Lillian. Yeah, despite your narcissistic tendencies, you still have what it takes to encourage a rookie like that. It was almost as touching as that one time my little angel Lucy drew a picture of me. It's still framed in my bedroom wall to this day. Oi, I'm not snobby or arrogant. Just what kind of a person do you think I am, Lillian? The last person should be lecturing me on narcissism is a sister-obsessed weirdo like you, Elaine. Vice Captain Edward started to yell at them as his face tinted red from a mixture of embarrassment and anger, whereas Sir Elaine and Miss Lillian had tears in their eyes as they crowded around us. Miss Charlotte, on the other hand, was writing in a notepad while staring at Vice Captain Edward with a smile. This is a side of the Edward that is pretty good. The gap between his usual high-born noble side and a rare, caring, superior side is cute. And this added at least 3 points to your harem number score. I guess that's what it feels like to be a mother watching a child grow up. You guys, stop, said Edward. It seemed like Vice Captain Edward finally snapped as he chased the rest of the 7th Squad Knights back towards the barracks. I just stood there, a bit at a loss for words as I watched their antics. But right before he ran back inside, I could hear Sarah Lane call out to me. Just take a break for now, rookie. You must be tired. We can have our spar tomorrow if we really need to. Well, he's probably right. I should take a break. I looked down at my hands. They were starting to shake again after the last exchange of blows before raising my head to gaze at the sky. The sunset was beginning to die, and the sky beautiful shade of purples. It was getting late. I took a deep breath and exhaled as the sound of steady footsteps approached me. Captain Arya? Have I gotten stronger? Yes, you have. Her quiet voice rang out against mine as I continued to stare at the sky. But this time her voice was different compared to earlier. Her voice sounded a bit warm, and the calmness in her words eased the doubt in my mind more than anything else. Yeah, Captain Arya would know better than anyone, wouldn't she? I've gotten stronger. Rangus, Zane, you just wait, you two. I can't just keep staring at your backs forever. I'll catch up soon. The shaking stopped. My hands weren't trembling anymore, and the smile couldn't help but form on my face as I lowered my head before turning towards Captain Arya. Yeah. Let's go back to training then. Solaria, Shopping District. The Ironclad Forge. Kyle's point of view. It's pretty late, isn't it? The evening twilight had already settled on the imperial capital, blanketing the shopping district that we had just returned to after a long first week at our training camp. However, Despite the dark night sky, the noisy atmosphere of the shopping district was still in full force, as the alchemical lamps lighting the streets lit our surroundings with a warm tint. Dozens of people walked by as I stopped staring at the sky and lowered my head with a bitter look on my face. Which is probably why the ironclad forge is closed. Yes, in front of us was the same brick and stone smithy with the same chimney sticking out of the building, but inside of the store mirrored the night sky outside. You could see through the windows, and there wasn't a single light on. I let out a disappointing sigh as I turned around to face Rangus and Sophie. Sorry, I thought we could make it back sooner. It's fine. We'll just come up again tomorrow. We've already closed, so there's nothing you can do, Professor Kyle. Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess we can just proceed with the original plan for now. Go home and rest, you two. After surviving the past week of hellish training, I think you two deserve it. Well, the source of their determination may have changed a bit during the past week, but they still passed the first part of Professor Kyle's training camp with flying colors, didn't they? Although, unfortunately, neither of them have unlocked a hidden bloodline power or anything crazy like that. But we still have another week before the tournament, so who knows what will happen. I smiled at the two of them, as a sense of pride welled up inside my heart. Rangus nodded silently in agreement to our plans, while Sophie muttered something to herself before quietly letting out a disappointed sigh. Just as I feared. No dinner tonight, huh? Actually, the truth is, I may have heard what Sophie had muttered to herself. But luckily, it was something that I decided to completely ignore. Perhaps for my own sake, it was better to just pretend that the resolve in their eyes was still purely because they wanted to get stronger to protect their friends, and completely untainted by my previous mental manipulations. After I chuckled dryly to myself for a moment, I made plans with Sophie to meet up at the ironclad forge tomorrow morning before we all split up and went home. It was now well into the evening, and the twilight had suddenly given way to darkness that covered the sky. I could see the stars shining beautifully as I made my way back home with my backpack slung over my shoulder. Ha! I let out a relaxing sigh as I rounded the corner towards the Israel mansion while enjoying quite the atmosphere that pervaded the noble district. It was a world of difference from the liveliness of the shopping district, and a strange sense of anticipation bubbled up inside me as I thought about seeing Arya again for the first time in a while. A breath of crisp night air entered my lungs as I walked up to the front door. A moment later, I opened it to see the same old living room as always. The only difference was that it was slightly disorganized, but it was like a weight was lifted off my heart after seeing that, and the corners of my mouth couldn't help but curve upward into a relieved smile. I thought the house would be an absolute mess after I was gone for a week, but it looks like I worried too much. I guess I've been so used to Eliza's shenanigans that I've forgotten Arya's a proper adult who can take care of herself. Arya, I'm home. I gently called out to Arya as I entered the house, but after a few moments it was clear that the only response I was going to get was silence. I guess she isn't home yet. The lights are on, though. Did she forget to turn them off? She already exceeded my expectations with how clean the house is. Still, so I guess it's fine to let something small like this slide once in a while. I'll go unpack my stuff first and then make dinner. Should I make Arya's favorite? Well, it will be her first fresh meal in a while, so I guess making it up a bit wouldn't hurt. The familiar scent of home eased my heart as I walked over to the stairs while thinking about what to make for dinner. Solaria, Middle District. Israel Mansion, Arya's point of view. I hugged my pillow in my arms a little tighter as I let out a quiet sigh. What am I doing? I couldn't help but glance around at the slightly familiar room as I sat on my bed in my pajamas. The room was a bit plain, and it only had the essentials in terms of furniture, but everything in it reminded me of a certain person who was important to me. Well, actually, it was probably because this was that person's room, but it wasn't the main issue at hand. The real problem was I was lonely. I missed Kai. It hadn't felt this lonely in a long time, and even though I had everyone at the barracks to help me ease my loneliness during the day, in the end, I still had to come back to this empty house every night. It's like being able to eat as much delicious food as you want before suddenly starving again. I glanced over at the desk, which had some notebooks and a few bags of alchemy materials, before making my gaze out to the window. It was Friday night. The stars were shining brightly and the moon was beautiful in the night sky. But all I wanted was for the moon and stars to disappear just as fast as possible so the sun could rise and it would be tomorrow already. Just one more day. A few comments passed as I continued to stare out of my window before I slumped backwards into Kai's bed while hugging his pillow. Then I closed my eyes and took a deep breath before starting to fantasize about what tomorrow would be like. Tomorrow, he'll be back tomorrow morning. He'll open up the door, walk back in, call out to me like usual. Then I can cure my crippling Kai deficiency, and everything will be okay again. The corners of my mouth couldn't help but curve upwards into a soft smile as the sound of a familiar voice suddenly echoed through my mind. Arya, I'm home. Yet, he would sound just like that, yeah. I giggled softly to myself and rolled around on Kai's bed while hugging his pillow as I continued to daydream before suddenly I heard the sound of the door opening followed by a thud. Huh? I immediately froze before slowly sitting up in Kai's bed. And it was then that I saw a certain person who had just awkwardly dropped his backpack while standing at the entrance to the room. A head full of snow-white hair that was tied into a ponytail poked its way past the door as a pair of golden eyes stared straight at me. I swore that my heart stopped when I blankly stared back at Kai, but for some reason there was still blood rushing to my face as it started to burn up. I'm sorry. After a moment, Kai broke the awkward silence and turned away with a dazed look in his eyes, and he smiled blankly at me. I could see the slight blush on his face as he tried to close the door, but I immediately threw his pillow away, leapt out of his bed, and grabbed his arm to stop him before he could leave. Wait. It's not what you think. So you were in my bed because your back felt aching? Yeah. My back's been aching a bit since this morning. They say a firm mattress is better for the back, right? But my bed is too soft, so I was planning to use yours. It was only for tonight, though. Only one day. I just barely managed to choke out my response in a shaky voice as I averted my eyes from Kai and glanced around at the rest of the dining room before taking another bite of food. It was the first time in a while I had some of Kai's cooking, and it wasn't reheated. And today's dinner was even my favorite beef and potatoes. But my mind was currently more preoccupied with the current situation than eating. I couldn't tell if my face was still completely burning red, but I could definitely still feel some heat when I touched my cheek. My embarrassment scream echoed out internally in my mind as I quickly swallowed the food in my mouth and panicked before hiding my face from Kai. It's red, isn't it? It's definitely still red. Calm down, Arya. If you don't calm down, then Kai will be able to tell you're lying. Well, wait. Actually, now that I think about it, my story is super suspicious, isn't it? I made it up on the spot, so of course it isn't going to be perfect for an alibi. But aren't there too many holes in the story? He just saw me jump out of bed and tackle him with no problems. It's not like I've been pretending my back hurts either. I held my hand up to my chest. I could feel my heart racing after thinking about how suspicious my explanation sounded. But I tried my best to calm down before thinking about what to do next. It's too late to change my story now. I need to change the subject or something else. I raised my arms and pretended to stretch a bit before trying my best to stop the shaking in my voice. But for some reason I'm feeling fine now, so just forget about it, huh, Kai? I let out a fake laugh as I smiled awkwardly at Kai. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're okay then. Kai's awkward response had a slightly embarrassed tone in it as he answered, and then there was a look in his eyes that seemed to say he wouldn't pry any further for the sake of my dignity. Wait, I'm telling the truth, I swear! It's okay, Arya, I believe you. He doesn't believe me, he definitely doesn't. My face was now bright red again as I lowered my head to hide my raging blush from Kai for a moment before reaching across the table to grab Kai by his shirt while mumbling to myself, "Just forget it." Okay, said Kai. Forget it. Wipe it from your memory. Forget everything you saw. My scarlet blush had already spread out to the tips of my ears as I raised my head again and flustered panic to yell at Kai to forget everything before starting to shake him roughly. How? I don't have the power to erase my memory at will. Just smash your head against the wall or something until you forget, okay? It doesn't work like that. I'll end up with a broken wall. I'll do it myself. Just hold still. I'll need the one clean hit. Oh, wait. Why does this sound like you're trying to put me out of my misery instead? Royal Academy. Boys' dormitory. Zane's point of view. You can make it, Zane. Come on. Just a few more steps and you can finally rest. I let out an exhausted breath as I slowly took another step towards my room. My legs felt heavy. My head was starting to hurt from the sound of the birds chirping outside, and the morning sunlight shining in through the windows was making my eyes sting as I slowly walked down the hallway towards my dorm room. But it was nothing compared to the suffering I had endured this past week helping Master Selphie finish the preparations for the tournament. My line of sight wavered for a moment as my mind drifted back to a few minutes ago when I finally escaped from that hellhole of paperwork. Master Selphie was sitting at her desk while surrounded by piles of paperwork like usual, except this time she had dark bags under her eyes even worse than mine. They made it seem like she hadn't slept in days, and she was halfway through the application form from the magic department when she finally gave in to her fatigue and fell asleep at her desk, which then allowed me to quietly make my escape. I know we're really behind schedule, but she's crazy. It's a miracle how she even lasted that long. It's only been a night without sleep for me, but I'm already close to my limit. But I don't think she's had a wink of sleep in 2 days, until now. At that rate, she's probably going to end up collapsing from exhaustion before she even starts teaching me. Damn it. If only Kai stayed instead of running off to train Sophie and Rengus. Then I could have pushed all of this onto him, and I would be relaxing right now instead. Why am I the only one who has to suffer so much before even starting my training? I finally arrived in front of the door to my room, as aggravated tears were starting to well up in my eyes, and my body was screaming at me to just give up and collapse right there. Then all of a sudden, I heard a sound of the door opening, followed by a yawn. I turned towards the source of the sound to see Rengus leisurely walking out of his room. I must be going crazy, too. I'm already starting to see things. I mumbled to myself before chuckling bitterly at the moment that I convinced myself that it was just an illusion. Before, right as I decided just to ignore everything in front of me, Rengus finally noticed me, and he uncharacteristically relaxed, looking on his face, intent morphed into confusion as he called out to me. What have you been doing, Zane? Why do you look like an absolute mess? Huh? You're real? What are you talking about? I stared at Rengus in disbelief for a moment, but after rubbing my eyes to reaffirm what he was, without a doubt standing right in front of me, came to a certain realization. Wait, if Rengus is here, then that means... If you're back, then he must be too. What? Where's Kai? I'll find him. I'll definitely find Kai and push all this off onto him if it's the last thing I do. It was like I sprang back to life as I grabbed Rengus with a desperate look of my exhausted face, while a good portion of my fatigue was shoved to the back of my mind to be ignored until I managed to dump my responsibilities onto Kai. Professor Kyle, he should be at the blacksmith. What What are you waiting for them? Let's go. Solaria Shopping District, Ironclad Forge. Kyle's point of view. All right, here you go, Miss Sophie. It was a bit tricky to shape the inner details at first, but all it took was a few tries to get used to it for someone with my level of talent. Thank you. Lucas let out a prideful laugh and handed Sophie her new handguns as Uncle Greyhill let out a disappointed sigh. That's enough, boy. What did your modesty go? Well, I think it's fine to let him be a little prideful of his work. After all, it genuinely was a difficult request from what I can see. Lucas recreated my blueprints almost perfectly. A little pride is fine. But if you let him run his mouth freely like that, then he'll never learn to be humble. A true blacksmith is one who doesn't need to brag about his skill because his work does it for him. Uncle Greyhill crossed his arms and nodded to himself with a smile on his face, but Lucas's angry voice cut him off before he could continue preaching about the virtues of a true blacksmith. Hey! A few months ago, weren't you bragging about me to Miss Arya's sword and to everyone you met? You must have seen it, Kai. Even the mailman couldn't hear the end of it from that old man. Uncle Greyhill, his face turned a little red from embarrassment as he cleared his throat awkwardly before gushing about Arya's sword. Well, the lassie's sword was different. It was pure Killium. How many blacksmiths in the world do you think can even dream about even touching a bit of a Killium boy, huh? Even if he had the chance to forge a whole sword out of it. How could I not brag? Ah, it was incredible. The Archilium must have been at least 5 times as hard as steel. Yet, you still folded so cleanly. Even the sharpening was smoother than any other sword I'd forged before that. Whatever, you hypocrite. Lucas clicked his tongue as Uncle Greyhill then turned his face to Sophie, and again, as Uncle Greyhill continued to reminisce about the forging of Arya's sword in the background. Anyway, what are you two going to do with them now? Aren't they supposed to shoot magic or something? Oh, right. Sophie, you bought the alchemy supplies, right? Of course. I turned towards Sophie, who handed her new handguns over to me with an excited sparkle in her eyes. She placed a few bottles of enchanted ink on the counter before pulling her old rifle off her back and unveiling it. So, how are we going to modify the alchemy system? Well, I already have a great idea of what circles to modify. The real problem will be blending the new alchemy circles into it so it's run smoothly. But it shouldn't take long. If we start now, we can probably get it working by lunchtime. Actually, about lunch. Sophie wiped away a bit of her drool from her corner of her mouth, and she began to ask me about lunch when suddenly she was cut off by the sound of the door being kicked open. I turned towards the entrance of the shop to see Zane run in while Rangus followed him. Kai! Zane was panting heavily as he entered the shop. His disheveled appearance, along with the dark bags under his eyes, made it obvious that he was almost at his physical limit, as he stumbled over before collapsing to his knees in front of me. I turned to Rangus for an explanation, but the bewildered look on his face told me that he had just about as much of the idea of what was happening as I did. Zane, what's with the bags under your eyes? Quick, come with me to the academy. Huh? Zane grabbed my legs with a desperate glint in his exhausted eyes as suddenly my intuition warned me that it was going to be something tiresome. Please, Kai, I need your help. You're the only one that can save me. Oh, why do I feel like this is going to be a pain in the neck?